Wild versus Blues, Nylander and Quennville NHL News, November 11th, 2018. First off, I just wanted to say a happy Remembrance Day and happy Veterans Day to those of you living in Canada and the United States. I'm only covering one game at this point. I'll get the other 6 games later tonight in another video. And I also have some news for you. But let's get to the board first. Minnesota Wild versus St. Louis Blues. St. Louis really needed this win. Johnson started again in net for St. Louis. He had a shutout on Friday against the San Jose Sharks. Pretty impressive. He didn't quite make it in this game, as you can see. Mike Yeo's job could be in jeopardy. And he's already mentioned it publicly. Boldly and quite honestly, that it should be in question with the results they've gotten so far this year. Minnesota, most people, with the exception of myself, thought they weren't going to do that well this year. I had them making the playoffs, though, by a couple spots. So, in any case, enough with my bragging. Let's move on to the score sheet here. St. Louis starts off with a goal by Sundqvist. His third goal of the season, assisted by Barbashev. Sundqvist, if you remember, was the one who got that head hit by Wilson, in which he was suspended for 20 games in the during the in a preseason game, but suspended 20 games for the regular season. He's playing again, and I believe he centers. I'm pretty sure he centers the fourth line. So that's depth scoring. It's great for St. Louis. They do have, you're looking at O'Reilly. You're looking at Shen, and you're looking at Bozak down the middle. That's pretty fresh. Anyways, on to the second period. Minnesota answers back. They tied the game. Parise scores his 7th of the year. He's on a decent clip right now, assisted by Niederreiter and Brodin, or Broden. I like Broden, but I think it's probably Brodin. Then Minnesota goes ahead 2-1. Eriksson Ek scores his first of the season. I think Minnesota's been expecting a little more output out of him, at least in terms of goals. Assisted by Greenway and Coyle. Then St. Louis ties it up. Captain Pietrangelo scores his 3rd of the season, assisted by Schwartz and O'Reilly. It's a 2-2 game. And mind you, I couldn't really... Maybe Johnson could have saved the second Minnesota goal, but the first one was just a bad bounce off the crossbar to the back of his stick. It was just bad luck for him. And in the third period, Granlund gets his 10th of the season unassisted. That was just a beauty of a shot in the slot, high in the slot. Really, not many goalies would be able to save that. So. Although Minnesota didn't get many shots, I don't think you can blame Johnson too much on this loss. Minnesota's 0 for 2 on the power play. St. Louis is 0 for 2 as well. Dubnyk stops 29 of 31 shots. Good numbers. Johnson gets 15 of 18. St. Louis looked really good in the last few minutes of this game, and they looked like they were pressuring and they could tie it up. And then Perron goes ahead and takes a penalty, a slashing penalty on Seller. Now they had offsetting roughing penalties early in the game, and I'm not sure I really liked this penalty in the first place though, because it was a slashing call. It went into his hands, but it really didn't look like much. But I think the ref was eyeing them since their previous penalties, and I don't think the ref got this one right, but whatever. He got that penalty with just under 3 minutes left in the game. So St. Louis, although Minnesota didn't get a shot at all on the power play, and then they iced the puck with the last 40 seconds left. So that was sort of ideal for St. Louis, and they really pressured it in the end. They pulled the goalie, obviously, starting in the offensive zone, and came close, but Dubnyk just was on. He was focused all game, and they had at least 3 really good scoring chances, but had more like 5-6 shots in the end in that last little flurry. So Minnesota's now 11-4-2 with 24 points. They're looking really good. They're one of the top teams in the league right now. I want to say just behind. I think Nashville's the only one ahead of them at the moment. St. Louis is now 6-6-3 with 15 points. They should be doing better than this. There's not much more I can say about that, and I'll talk more about this in a minute as we move on to the NHL news and notes. And starting with that, let's talk Nylander. I haven't done any videos about this so far, but yesterday, Elliot Friedman said that the Leafs have asked interested teams to begin preparing formal offers on William Nylander. It's November 11th. If the Leafs don't sign him by December 1st, he has to sit for the remainder of the year. Now, of course, the Leafs still retain his rights for the next few years. But if he wants to play, the Leafs have to, and if the Leafs want to get something for him that they can, potentially put on the ice, they have to trade him, before December 1st or sign him. What's more likely? I might be leaning slightly more towards trade right now, but you never know. With Dubas, he might pull something out of a hat right now, be it a short-term deal or maybe Nylander caves. You keep hearing in anything written or said by Kyprios or Friedman from Sportsnet, or even from different sources in TSN, that Nylander's father has been really involved. And of course, if you know his father, he used to play, and he opened his own agency in a partnership, and it looks like he's been playing, I don't want to say Grimer Wormtongue, if you know that Lord of the Rings reference, whispering into Nylander's ear, being his father and all, and the way he was kind of difficult in his own contract negotiations when he was a player. So I don't want to make it look like, push blame onto either side, but this is what's being said right now in social media with these reporters. Now, I thought I'd do something a little fun here and talk about potentially interested teams in Nylander. Now, what's been reported so far is Carolina. Basically, all you hear is Carolina is hugely interested and they're all in on Nylander. What could potentially come the other way? Who knows? You've heard it's most likely Pesce. It would involve Pesce. I don't think so much Falk or Slavin. And there's also, Hamilton's name has been thrown out there, but I would think Pesce and another piece, and maybe William Nylander and possibly another piece. Maybe Jake Gardiner, seeing as how he's on his contract is expiring this season, and at least may not be able to afford him. So he in any William Nylander, in any Nylander deal might involve Gardiner as well. Just it's possible. I just don't see the Leafs paying him, what he could get on the open market, which is probably at least $7 million next season for the kind of points he puts up. Obviously, Gardiner has got his faults. He can. He's known for his giveaways in the neutral and defensive zone, but he put up, was it just over 60 points last season? So yeah, he's going to get at least 7. So he look for that to maybe be involved in any trade that the Leafs do, either this year before the trade deadline or even in a package with Nylander. Now, LA has also been interested, but I just don't see the Leafs being interested in anything LA has right now of consequence. I think the Leafs are looking for a defenseman who's in and around close to the same age as Nylander, which is around 22. And I think it's going to be someone who's responsible in their own zone and has at least a bit of a potential offensive upside. But defense is paramount. These teams I have circled in green here are my guesses. They're not what has been reported. They're my guesses on who else might be interested in Nylander, and I'll tell you why. I have Anaheim first off here. Anaheim is 10th in the West right now. They're not doing well. They're below 500, and they could. There's a lot of injuries on that team. Getzlaf is in and out of the lineup. Kessler's playing with a new hip, but he's playing well so far. But there's a lot of other injuries, forward injuries and center depth injuries at the moment. And Nylander can play both. He can play winger and he can play center. So and Anaheim has the kind of defense the Leafs would want. They've got a plethora of high-end defensemen. Really anyone from their top four could be a target. So I could see Anaheim sniffing around there right now. Can they afford him? Will they pay him, what he's looking for, which is, probably upwards between $7 and $8 million? I don't know about that. So that might eliminate them in that stance. But if the Leafs are taking back a defenseman, for instance, maybe there's money being swapped either way. Gardner could probably go in the other direction, as I mentioned earlier before. But yeah, St. Louis. St. Louis is sitting in 11th in the West right now, and there's a lot of talk about the coach. About his job being on the hot seat. He's even said so himself. St. Louis' probably bigger problem right now is goaltending more than anything else. But who couldn't use someone who could play center and wing and play with some of those guys? It would really beef up their already decent offensive forward numbers at the moment. I know the Leafs really look at Parayko there. Would St. Louis give him up? That's another thing entirely. Because Parayko is quite he's a big defenseman who's has a decent speed on his feet. He's very defensively responsible, and he can transition. He can carry the puck as well. So that's a possibility. Vegas is sitting 13th in the West right now, and Stastny has been hurt, and he's going to be out for another month or two. He was their second line center. Haula just got hurt in a game against the Leafs the other day. He was playing their second line center because Stastny was gone, but he initially was supposed to be their third line center, and now he's injured too. So Vegas could really use a guy who can play both wing and center, and who can score some goals, but is a playmaker. I could see him being really valuable to him. What would Vegas give up? Maybe one of their top prospects? I don't know. Maybe one of their top 3D? How desperate are they? We'll see. They have to make up their minds between now and December 1st, so that it's a possibility. That's all I'm saying. These are just teams that, in my mind, who I think might also be interested because of where they are in the standings and what they want to accomplish and what the Leafs could possibly get from them. Minnesota is probably the least likely team I would see the Leafs dealing with here, but I put them up there because they have probably what I would like to see the Leafs get, which would be a perfect match for them, which is Dumba. And I know Minnesota fans, Dumba's not going anywhere, but Leafs would covet that guy. And I know there's also, oh my God, what's the other defenseman's name? Starts with an S. Spurgeon. That's a potentiality as well. But Dumba's a right shot defenseman. He's got some offense. He's good on defense. Him and Riley would make a killer first line defense pairing. If Leafs were able to pull some sort of package, Nylander, Gardner to Minnesota. Gardner, he's from Minnesota. Maybe he might be more likely not only to sign there, but to take a bit of a discount. Maybe. That's just a little hindsight, something to think about there too. Possibly, as crazy as that may sound to Minnesota fans. The other one is Philly. Now they're at number 5 in the East right now, and at least towards the beginning of the season, a lot of Philly fans were crying for Hextall's. I keep on want to say Hextall, who's their GM. Hextall's, their coach, is head because of some of the coaching decisions he was making, and they weren't doing. Now, they're not doing. They're maybe I want to say a couple games over 500 or so. Philly's big problem is goaltending. They have I believe it's Cody. I want to say Cody Hart. I know his last name is Hart, the Canadian goalie, who's basically the next in line. He may get a smell this year for a few games, but I don't think he's coming in until next season, and he still may take another season or two to get acclimatized to the NHL. Maybe he will right away. I don't know, but Hart's the next one coming up. So maybe there's something there. I don't think Philly would part with Provorov. Maybe the Ghost's Fire, if I'm pronouncing that. I'll just call him Ghost. Maybe the Ghost. But I think Toronto would be looking for more for a player like Provorov. Because Ghost's Fire is more known for his offense. Provorov is more solid in both ends of the ice. I just don't see Philly giving him up, though. That would be amazing. I would put him right on equal grounds of the Leafs getting Dumba, because they're all around that same age, around 22, 21, I want to say. That would be perfect. But in any case, so besides Carolina and LA, I want to say Anaheim might be the most desperate team of my potential picks here. Anaheim and even St. Louis, I would say. That if it's not Carolina, I really don't think it's going to be LA. I would guess Anaheim or St. Louis. That's just my 2 cents, though. That wasn't reported anywhere. That's just my opinion. Now, last bit of news here. I know we're running a little high on time, but it was also reported yesterday by Nick Kyprios that John Quennville, who was fired as a Chicago Blackhawk coach after being there for, I think, 2008, 2007. He was there for a while. Won some cups with them. He's about 60 years old. A lot of people would covet him, but apparently Kyprios says that Quennville is not interested in taking. He is interested in possibly stepping into a coaching position as early as this season, but he's not interested. You see how I quotation marks here? He's not interested in taking over a team that is in the midst or considering a rebuild. So I thought I'd have some fun with that as well. And I thought, okay, well, what might be some potential teams who would go after him? Now, they'd have to take over his contract, which is paying him $6 million for the rest of this year and next season as well. So that's going to come into account. So the ones I underlined in orange are the ones I think are most likely, and the other ones are just some bit more of wild guesses. But St. Louis, right off the bat, Mike Yeo said it himself. His job may be in jeopardy. I think they're barely they're at 500 right now, and something's got to change. And if anyone could step in and do something, I think Quennville. I mean, he's already coached there before. He has got a history with them. He also coached with Colorado and one other team besides Chicago that I'm forgetting, I think. Anyways, I think that's fairly possible. I think that could be one of these. It's a very likely scenario. Florida Panthers. They're 15th in the East right now. They're at the bottom. A lot of people thought they'd be doing a lot better. They have a lot of forward depth, especially after picking up Hoffman. They have a solid two lines. Their defense, their top three is pretty good. Arguably, their top four have really good D. The only thing there is Luongo, who seems, you could say he shouldn't be playing more than 40-ish games because he tends to get injured. But that could be, for Quennville, if he was looking at what might be attractive to him, I'd say Florida has a lot of potential to be able to flip their season around right away because of the kind of players they have there now. The only question mark, as I said, like St. Louis, is the goaltending, only because Luongo gets injured, not because he's not good enough. The other is is Anaheim. They had a great start, won like their first 5, and then dropped their last 5, and they're 10th in the West right now. And I know Carlisle and Murray, the GM, have been friends, and that's why he brought Carlisle back. He didn't really want to fire him in the first place. And a lot of that's attributed to, or one would argue, the way they're doing right now is attributed to all the injuries they've been going through, especially on their forward ranks, their centermen, their wingers. They've had it real hard. And Gibson, who was amazing at the beginning of the season, is starting to show cracks because I believe they're at least top 3 when it comes to the most shots they give up a game. And they need a different system there. I think that might be the least attractive out of these 3. But it's the only one who probably has the most, I would argue, the most solid goaltending. At least Gibson seems to have a more, he's younger, he has more of a healthy track record than Luongo, especially because Luongo's like 40 or 41 years old, whatever he is right now. Anyways, here are some other teams that I thought I'd just throw out there. Again, these are all my guesses, my opinions. I didn't read this anywhere. LA. LA is in 15th place right now. They're in the rock bottom. I know they just put Benning in there as interim coach for the rest of the season. He used to coach the Canucks before he was fired. I don't see that being attractive to Quennville, though, because there's like 10, 12 players that are over 31 there. I don't think anyone can turn around the team right now. I think, sorry LA fans, but I think they're in denial. I think the team is just way too old. They need to make at least a few trades and get some of those older guys, get some fresh faces in there, like a Nylander, who I don't think would be going there, in order for them to turn around that season. There's too much work to be done there from a GM perspective. Bodies moving in and out. For Quennville to look there and say, yeah, that's a good option. But I think LA would have the money, that's for sure. Anaheim might not have the money to pay him what he wants. Florida's a bit of a question mark. St. Louis, I think, would do it. Edmonton. They're sitting 8th in the West right now. It's one of those things like, who's going to go first in Edmonton? Have they turned the season around? They're a couple games over 500 at the moment. Would Chiarelli go first? Would McClellan go first? Chicken or the egg? Would that be attractive to Quennville? Could they pay him? I think so. I don't know. Philadelphia is my next guess. Now, they're sitting in 5th. LA just had a shutout last night. But still, the big question for Philly is goaltending. As I mentioned earlier up here. I won't go over that again. But, Philly looks like to be an up-and-coming team. I think Hextall... I know, Flyer fans are starting to become a little impatient, but I think they're on the path to being contenders. Maybe once they get that goaltender in a couple of years' time. So Quennville might look at that and see definite potential there. A team that's, they're I think they're coming out of the rebuild stage and they're starting to make waves. Once they get that goaltender, I think look out. I think Philly's going to be dangerous, and they get Van Riemsdyk back in the lineup. Washington's my other guess. They're sitting 11th right now, and I have the game, Washington versus the Coyote games, just off of my screen, and they just lost 4-1 to Arizona. I believe that puts them under 500. That might even sink them to 12th in the East. Is it time to panic in Washington? I don't know. And there's there's cup hangover talk, all that kind of thing. Is the temptation for the Washington owner of putting Quennville in that coaching position too much to want to have to wait before any other team might snag him? Will he do it? I don't know. I know that's a bit of quite a wild card, and people might think I'm crazy mentioning that, but seeing as how they're doing lately, I don't think anyone thinks, including myself, that Washington is not going to make the playoffs. But who knows by how much? And, I mean, it happened to Pittsburgh. They fell out of the playoffs. I think it was the year before they went for their cup run. So it could happen. Look at Tampa Bay. It happened to Tampa Bay. They were contenders. Then all of a sudden they didn't make the playoffs. I know it was to do with injuries and such. But there's not many injuries right now except for the suspension of Wilson. And I know Carlson is out for like a couple games here and there. But and it could be fatigue. But I don't know. It's a possibility. That's all I'm saying. Columbus, they're second in the East right now, but that's only because they're first in the Metro. Otherwise, they'd be like fourth. At the beginning of the season, they weren't doing so well. They're going back and forth. This is a seesaw team, and with Panarin and their goaltender Bobrovsky potentially leaving at the end of the season, will Quennville look at that and be like, yeah, you could be next year. All of a sudden, you could be back into rebuild mode because of that reason. And there's a lot of good parts in Columbus. Don't get me wrong, but losing one of the best goaltenders in the league and your highest forward score, is going to be a little hard to recover from. And Quennville could look at that and be like, And with Columbus's record right now, maybe the GM won't be so. He wouldn't want to jump the gun and just fire Tortorella after doing well with him for last 2-3 years. In any case, this video has been way too long. Thank you so much for watching. Again, happy Remembrance and Veterans Day to those in Canada and the US. If you like this video, please hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. And if you know any hockey geek friends of yours, please don't feel shy about sharing. Thanks a lot. See you soon.